Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Another day, another rant. And today what I want to talk about is Pierre Poilievre. And part of what I want to talk about is whether or not he's the best option. And, you know, is there a better option? Is there someone better than Pierre Poilievre that Canadians should consider? Now, I want to start this rant out with a video. And this video is a debate between Stephen Harper and a debate between Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau. And the main, I guess you could say, point of contention in the debate is whether or not there are enough checks and balances when newcomers come to the country and claim refugee status. And what I guess you could say Stephen Harper is debating is that the answer is no. He personally believes that there needs to be more checks and balances, whereas Trudeau is essentially saying that Stephen Harper's perspective is rooted in essentially racism or hatred, right? But in reality, he's just saying that there needs to be more checks and balances. But anyways, guys, check out the clip, and I'll come back and give my thoughts, right?
On the issue of refugees, this remains one of the largest countries in the world in terms of refugee resettlement, including from Syria and Iraq.
That's not true, Mr. Harper.
I have said we will bring in more, but what I have said we will not do. You know, these guys would have had in the last 2 weeks us throwing open our borders and literally hundreds of thousands of people coming without any kind of security check or documentation.
And that's
some other
not
countries
true,
have
Mr.
done.
Harper.
That would have been an enormous mistake.
See,
we're following a balanced approach. We're bringing more refugees.
Fears all the time.
We're providing
fears
more
of
humanitarian
others,
support.
fears of different communities.
And we're taking
we have a
on
prime
the
minister
terrorists
who
are
prefers
creating
to
the
pander to
refugees.
fears.
Let's go to Mr. Mulcahy.
So, yeah, you've just seen the clip of Trudeau and Stephen Harper debating. And it kind of brings up an interesting point, which is recently Trudeau on his YouTube channel released a video where he says himself now in 2024 that there's a mistake that's been made on immigration into the country. And so in this video that I initially shared with you guys, Trudeau is speaking against Stephen Harper. But as it currently stands in most recent times on Justin Trudeau's YouTube channel, his views essentially align with what Stephen Harper was saying back then. And Stephen Harper was essentially presenting himself as somewhat of a, I guess you could say he was trying to point out the canary in the coal mine, because he was saying, hey, this is an issue, this is going to become an issue, and he was warning against electing Trudeau because of the fact that he would do the very same thing he is now acknowledging he's wrong for, right? So essentially, he's done a 180 and he's acknowledged that he's wrong. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to talk about some statistics that I think are interesting, and I want to emphasize who I think actually would be better than Pierre Poilievre, which is, you know, Maxime Bernier. And I say this because right now 70% of Canadians, according to a website called IPSOS, which is essentially it's a company that does global market research, and they essentially did a poll and they found that 70% of young Canadians are dissatisfied with Canada, and they believe that it's broken. And the reason I bring up Maxime Bernier is because even when you look at Pierre Poilievre, what you'll notice about Pierre Poilievre is that he'll say one thing and he'll do another. And so most recently where this was obvious was on the topic of immigration, where Pierre Poilievre has sort of presented himself as a, I guess you could he says he's a conservative, right? That's what he refers to himself as. But although he says that, and although he presents himself in that way, if you look into one of the videos that's actually, you know, not super viral on Twitter, but it's on Twitter and it's got some views, and I'll link it actually. I'll play the video right now so you guys can see the video.
Listen, we have a worker shortage in Canada. We have a demographic problem. Our population is too old. We need 700 young people. We need 700 young people to work in our factories, in our hospitals, in our shopping centers, driving truck, being accountants, lawyers, doctors. We need these workers in our country. It makes no sense for Canada to send them back when they could stay here and earn powerful paychecks and raise their families in peace. So, shame on Justin Trudeau for trying to deport these wonderful students. Stop the deportations. Keep the students here. Allow them to apply just like everyone else for permanent residency.
And share your thoughts on it. But essentially what the video is talking about is it's Pierre Poilievre standing in front of a large group of people, and he's essentially arguing basically for maintaining the same rates of immigration, essentially. But yet he is presenting himself as a conservative, and he's essentially, holding that position. And if you look, there's actually a really interesting statistic I want to bring up that relates to all of this. Sorry about the wait, guys. It's in here. I just have to find it. Okay, so here it is. Nearly half of Canadians favor mass deportations, and 65% think that there are too many immigrants in Canada. Yep, so I think that's the gist of it. Yep, so yeah, nearly half of Canadians favor mass deportation, and 65% think that there are too many immigrants, right? And so this is a topic that most Canadians agree is an issue, but yet Pierre Poilievre is being hypocritical in his stance and presenting himself as a conservative. But when he has the opportunity to, I guess you could say, speak boldly on the topic, he's retracting, and if anything, he's defending the inverse of what Canadians want. So this is why, I really believe that out of the three options, whether you look at Trudeau, Pierre Poilievre, or Maxime Bernier by far is the better option, simply because he's congruent to his beliefs. And actually, I have another clip, which I'm going to insert here, relating to that, which truly highlights what I'm essentially saying, right? And so here's the clip, and then I'll talk about it.
Now you can stay, but when they're gonna be expired,
we will see at that moment.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, if some of you have their permit that are expired,
nobody standing here is illegal. They have their permits.
But in your group of 100 people,
nobody is expired. If they would have been expired, they would have been deported.
Okay, but they will be deported when it be expired.
This is why. No, they won't be deported.
You just said that when it's going to be expired, they will be deported.
They will be legalizing their stay. No deportation will be needed in that moment.
But we will need deportation.
That's why you need to have full knowledge. You are a leader. I think you should have a full knowledge before you get in here.
I have a full knowledge. I'm saying when the permit is expired, you must be deported.
You're saying my permit is expired. It isn't.
No, if it's not, but it will be in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months.
I can extend it.
But I hope they won't, because we don't need you.
Will.
No, we don't need you here in this country.
How can you decide it?
Because,
for example, listen to me.
There's Canadians, there's young Canadians that can work.
Okay, and so that clip that you just saw was of Maxime Bernier confronting somebody who was protesting regarding their immigration status and their belief that essentially their status should be extended so that they could stay in the country. Not immigration status, but their status such that it would allow them to stay in the country. And Maxime Bernier is essentially saying, well, hey, while your status is legitimate, there's no reason you can't stay in the country. If anything, you should be in the country while your status is legitimate. But he's saying that once your status has ended, that you have to leave. And the protester is defending against Maxime Bernier's point, and he's saying, well, hey, you know what, even if my visa expires, I could simply just extend it. And Maxime Bernier is essentially saying, well, the short and sweet of what he said is, well, no, if you're not needed here, then there's no reason why your status should be extended. And this is why I'm saying, is he even better than Pierre Poilievre? Because out of the three prime ministers, or I guess you could say potential prime ministers, Maxime Bernier is the only one who's being logically consistent and congruent with his beliefs. Whether it's Pierre Poilievre or whether it's Trudeau, Trudeau is backtracking on something that he implemented, but he's coincidentally doing it only around the time of election. Many Canadians have been complaining about the high tax rate in Canada, and I'm talking about cumulative tax. I'm talking about not just income tax, I'm saying GST, HST, and then I'm also talking about the carbon tax. And so Canadians in general have been opposed and aggravated with the overall tax rate. And as a result, they've wanted lower taxes. And lo and behold, right around election time, Trudeau temporarily basically takes away GST and HST. And so Trudeau, for his entire time in office, for those 2 terms, he has essentially done the inverse of everything that he's doing now. But right around now, where there's actually a incentive for him to change his ways, where he could potentially lose out on getting elected, he's now completely changing his view, right? And so that just speaks volumes about his character, considering he's only willing to give the citizens of Canada what they want when he may potentially get elected back into power for a third term, right? Whereas Pierre Poilievre, like I said in the clips that I've presented previously, Pierre Poilievre isn't being congruent or consistent with his beliefs. He's presenting himself as this conservative dude who's essentially going to make Canada great again, and he's going to, you know, reverse things to a better state. But then whenever he's called out on his behavior in terms of his lack of consistency, I mean, it's just silence, right? Like he's someone who, when his card is called, he's not actually who he claims to be. And so, again, guys, let's talk a little bit about Maxime Bernier's platform, which, you know, it's unfortunate that so many Canadians don't seem to appreciate the fact that Maxime Bernier is consistent with his beliefs, right? I mean, let's look at one of these, right? So one of Maxime Bernier's platforms, one of the points on his platforms is he says he wants to eliminate funding that promotes multiculturalism and instead emphasize the integration of immigrants into Canadian society. So if you understand what he's saying here, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but he's saying as opposed to having multiple cultures that are disjoint and essentially siloed from one another, he wants to have an initiative where immigrants are basically grafted into society and integrated, or he wants to encourage assimilation. Again, like, that has been a gripe and complaint of Canadians. Canadians have felt that there has been movements, whether it's the Khalistani movement or whether it's other movements, just movements in general in Canada. Many Canadians have been complaining that this form of strife and this form of contention is not a good dynamic to have in Canada. And what Maxime Bernier is saying here is he's saying, hey, you know how we could resolve that? We could resolve that by helping immigrants who come to the country assimilate into society and to integrate, as opposed to having disjoint societies that are siloed from one another. And again, if you're Canadian, I don't know why you wouldn't want more unity and more togetherness as a whole in the country. I mean, why would you want division, strife, and contention, right? And again, Maxime Bernier is the one who's leading the charge in saying that. And you can go on the PPC website, People's Party of Canada, and you can Google, you can research this stuff, right? So it's all there. I mean, another one he wants is Canadian value test. So let's read that. It says, ensure that every candidate for immigration undergoes face-to-face interviews and answers, sorry guys, a little wobbly here, face-to-face interviews and answers questions regarding, oh my gosh, sorry guys, let me see, read this again. Ensure that every candidate for immigration goes face-to-face interviews and answers specific questions to assess series of specific, oh my gosh, okay, take 100, let me get it right this time. Ensure that every candidate for immigration undergoes face-to-face interviews and answers a series of specific questions to assess the extent to which they align with Canadian values and societal norms. Okay, right? So if we look into that and we analyze what that means, what Maxime Bernier is saying here is he wants to assess before anyone even comes to Canada whether or not they value the opportunity and whether or not they actually care about the values that Canadians have, right? And again, if you look at the People Parties of Canada's website, they're not just saying things, they're actually giving solutions to these issues, and they're actually providing a clear, sensible, logical, and rational blueprint on how to resolve these issues. And again, whether it's Trudeau or whether it's Pierre Poilievre, you're not seeing this level of logical consistency, effort, time, detail, and commitment. You know, it's not available in these other parties. But yet, when you look at the polls, you know, the People's Party of Canada doesn't represent a large portion of the vote, and Pierre Poilievre is obviously leading the polls. And then you have Trudeau, who is no longer doing well as he was in the past. But it kind of shows you that, unfortunately, Canadians are not voting congruently with their beliefs. You know, they're saying that they want change in the checks and balances for immigration. They're saying that they want Canada to revert back to its, I guess you could say, healthier and more economic, prosperous state, or just a more unified society. But yet, if you look at the polls and you look at Maxime Bernier, which is the only, like, the least hypocritical option out of the three. He has the least votes. And it kind of shows me that, unfortunately, Canadians have fallen for a false dichotomy. They are not analyzing platforms as well. I'm not entirely sure if they're going to the platforms, each party's platform's website, and really doing a deep dive, because as far as what Canada used to be, Maxime Bernier's policies, or rather his platform goals, are most aligned with Canadians' initial, I guess you could say, function, right? Like Canada's initial function, or how Canada operated as a whole, is more aligned with the beliefs that Maxime Bernier has presented. And I didn't even go into all of Maxime Bernier's goals. I just gave some. I mean, he also talks about taxation. He talks about so many different topics, right, guys? I just listed some. I'm not going to list every single topic that Maxime Bernier discusses, but again, you know, as the title says, you know, is he even better than Pierre Poilievre? And I would say yes. Unfortunately, guys, I really don't believe that if Pierre Poilievre gets into power, I personally do not believe that he is going to drastically change society. And I mean, like I said, if you saw the clip that I shared in this video, you'll realize that Pierre Poilievre is hypocritical in that he's not being consistent with his beliefs. And then you have Trudeau, who is doing a 180 on everything he said right prior to election. And so Trudeau is doing the inverse. He's doing a 180, and then Pierre Poilievre is being hypocritical. And then when you look at when the dust settles, the only person left who's being logically consistent and congruent is Maxime Bernier, the man who has the least votes. And so, you know, not to be the bearer of bad news here, but it's kind of evidence that Canada is no longer voting aligned with the gripes that it has, meaning Canada is not seeking to vote for people who are most logically consistent with their intentions and what they're attempting to resolve in Canada. And so I do think this is going to be a really big issue going forward into the next term, because it shows that Pierre Poilievre is very low in probability to genuinely solve the issues that Canadians care about. And it highlights the fact that Canada honestly might not change much when Pierre gets into power. And I don't think, unfortunately, that Maxime Bernier will ever get enough traction to get into a position of power in Canada, because Canadians unfortunately don't seem to want to understand nuance, and they don't really want to elect anybody who would drastically change society. It seems like they're looking for what they believe is what they refer to as the safer option, but it just seems like the same thing with a slightly different flavor. But anyways, guys, that was my rant for this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Maxime Bernier is better than Pierre Poilievre? And, you know, I'd love you guys to share your thoughts on that, because I'm starting to believe that, honestly, I think a lot of people don't even know who Maxime Bernier is. And I think that that's part of the problem too, because once you look at his platform, you realize that he's discussing a reality which Canada used to be. And he's essentially trying to get Canada back into that state and into that position. And so I think it's unfortunate that there's been such a decline in Canada, but yet people are not voting to resolve that. You know, I mean, it's a bit insane, guys. But anyways, guys, please like and subscribe if you like the video. You know, that really helps. And I'll see you all in the next rant. Peace.